My first question is, Mr. Munger, you are largely credited with moving Warren away from the cigar butt approach to investing as it was practiced by Ben Graham. It's been stated that it was the purchase of See's Candy that taught you this important lesson of buying good businesses. At what point did you realize that this concept of buying good businesses was a better long-term investment strategy, and what was it in your discussions with Warren that allowed you to persuade him to move in that direction? Mr. Buffett, what was it in Mr. Munger's arguments for buying good businesses that persuaded you to abandon the cigar butt approach and move in his direction? My second question is, in both your experience, have you or Mr. Munger ever known of a company that has regained or replaced its competitive advantage once it was lost?
Charlie, do you want to answer the first question about how you...
Yeah, well, I think there's some mythology in this idea that I've been this great enlightener of Warren Buffett. Warren hasn't needed much enlightenment, but we both kept learning all the time, so that the man we were 5 years earlier was less sensible than the man who ultimately was there. And See's Candy did teach us both a wonderful lesson, and it'll teach you a lesson if I tell you the full story. If See's Candy had asked $100,000 more, Warren and I would have walked. That's how dumb we were at that time.
10,000 more.
And one of the reasons we didn't walk is while we were making this wonderful decision, we weren't going to pay a dime more. Ira Marshall said to us, "You guys are crazy. There's some things you should pay up for, quality, business quality, and so forth. You're underestimating quality." Well, Warren and I, instead of behaving the way they do in a lot of places, we listened to the criticism. We changed our mind. And that is a very good lesson for anyone. The ability to take criticism constructively is well, think of all the money we made for accepting that one criticism. And if you count the indirect effects from what we learned from buying See's, you can say that Berkshire's been built partly by learning from criticism. Now, we don't want any more today.
Yeah. We also like the peanut brittle, so Charlie is playing that. I had learned investment and got enormous benefit out of that learning from a fellow who concentrated on the quantitative aspects, Ben Graham, and who didn't dismiss the qualitative aspects, but he said you could make enough money focusing on quantitative aspects, which were a more sure way of going at things and would enable you to identify the cigar butts. He would say that the qualitative is harder to teach, it's harder to write about, it may require more insight than the quantitative, and besides, the quantitative works fine, so why try harder? And on a small scale, there was a very good point to that. But Charlie really did, wasn't just Ira Marshall, but Charlie emphasized the qualitative much more than I did when I started. He had a different background to some extent than I did. I was enormously impressed by a terrific teacher, and for good reason. But it makes more sense, as we pointed out, to buy a wonderful business at a fair price than a fair business at a wonderful price. And we've changed I've changed my focus anyway, and Charlie already had it, over the years in that direction. And then, of course, we have learned by what we've seen. I mean, it's not hard when you've watched businesses for 50 years, to learn a few things about them as to where the big money can be made. Now, you say, when did it happen? It's very interesting on that, because what happens, even when you're getting a new important idea, is that the old ideas are still there. So there's this flickering in and out of things. I mean, there was not a strong, bright red line of demarcation where we went from cigar butts to wonderful companies. But we've moved in that direction, occasionally moved back, because there is money made in cigar butts. But overall, we've kept moving in the direction of better and better companies, and now we've got a collection of wonderful companies.